Hello, everyone. This is Petroleum, and I'm here today on a slightly later day in the week than I was hoping to get this out, but unfortunately, I was a little bit sick over the weekend, but I'm okay now. So, we're getting into part one of our ADV team building series. There is a part zero, which I would definitely recommend that you go check out. It's all about sample teams, and I do think that sample teams and playing with them is an important part of your team building process, at least, and especially if you are newer to the tier. But even if you're experienced, it's good to play with teams that other people have built and sort of get some ideas and learn some interactions that maybe you're not as familiar with. At the end of the day, Pokemon is a game a lot about pattern recognition, and that's going to be true for the team building aspect as well. So go ahead and build your repertoire. But you've ignored all this advice and you're just wanting to build your own team, which, I mean, okay, I get it. I'm going to help you try to make some of the right steps forward as somebody who's looking to build a new team. I'm going to try to keep things kind of general, and I'm not going to say too much absolute isms because I don't think that they're that helpful. There are some players who have like their manifesto or their commandments or whatever of team building, which may work very well for them, but I think that there's a lot more creativity, and I hope I don't stifle that with this. But we're going to continue on to kind of construct the foundation or the timeline for team building. So I'm going to break down team building into 4 general phases. You can remember this as IDAC. I didn't really think about the acronym too much, but sure, you can go with that. Phase 1 is going to be the initial concept. So this is going to be like the seed of your game plan with the team. What identity does your team have? Is it going to be like a TSS archetype? Are you going to play a mix offense? Are you going to play something like a spikeless trapper team? Like, there's a lot of different sort of ways to go in ADV, and finding that sort of team identity is going to be helpful for trying to build and have a consistent game plan. Another thing is, what key Pokemon are you going to support? Basically, like, I want to build a team around 1 Pokemon or 2 Pokemon that I think have some sort of thing that they can do, whether it be separately, together, whatever the case may be. What are you going to basically start with is the whole idea of the initial phase. Phase 2 is the draft. How are you going to support the key Pokemon that you have started to build around? This is going to be like filling out with the whole team of 6. You might not necessarily have exactly their EVs or their moves picked out, but you are going to need to eventually come up with 6 Pokemon for a team, unless you're doing something silly like solo Registeel on low ladder trying to clip farm. I mean, it can happen, but we're here to build like a real team, right? Are you equipped to play against the common mons in the tier with your draft? That's something that's really important to figure out. As a little bit of a reminder, this is the ADV 2024 viability rankings, everything that is B1 or higher. These are some of the Pokemon that you definitely need to have answers for on your team, because if your team absolutely can't do anything when one of these Pokemon hits the field, then, well, you're going to lose a lot of games, because these are some of the most commonly brought Pokemon. That's not to say that you can ignore everything else below that. There are plenty of teams that get 6-0'd by Starmie that probably could stand to have a better special wall on them. There are plenty of teams that can't really handle Snorlax, even if they handle Blissey decently well, and very, very many other such cases. Heracross, Raikou, lots of things can destroy you. So, but you want to keep a lot of these threats in mind, and in particular these very popular ones that are on the screen here. Phase 3 is going to be adjustments. So once you've finally put all 6 Pokemon into the builder, maybe you filled out their movesets, maybe you've even picked some EV spreads for them. How can you optimize your EVs and movesets to handle specific interactions? Maybe you look at your team and you're like, okay, Swampert's my only rock resist on the team. And if something like a DD double-edged Tyranitar breaks through my Swampert, then I'm just going to lose to Aerodactyl. Well, if that's the case, maybe you're going to want to have a very bulky Swampert. Maybe you're going to want like a lot of defense investment. Perhaps you might want to look into having a secondary rock resist on the team, which we'll sort of talk about in the next phase, whether we're going to be switching Pokemon out at this stage or not. But I mean, certainly you can do that. Would better different Pokemon be better at accomplishing particular roles that you're looking for? So yeah, Swampert, great rock resist, but can it handle like a solid rock spam team? Especially if you're looking to go like an offensive Swampert route, maybe you're going to want something else to go with it. Maybe a Metagross or a Jirachi, or I don't know, even maybe a Flygon. Not impossible. I've done that before, mostly on a Superman team, but yeah, that could be a case for you. Perhaps it's something else like, oh, my team does not have a good way to punish Dugtrio. Dugtrio comes in and eliminates my Superachi, and then it eliminates my Celebi, and then it eliminates my Tyranitar. And like the worst thing I can do to it is come in with Starmie and get a Spike Up, like, which is not bad, mind you, but like you're giving up so many kills to Doug. What are we gonna do to punish that? Maybe the answer is you get like a Dragon Dancer like Salamence or Gyarados on your team that comes in and threatens to set up and win in the face of Dugtrio. Maybe you have Porygon 2 to trap it, because you have a really Doug weak team. There are a lot of things you could do for that, for sure. And figuring that out is definitely a good thing to do before you even load a game. But now we're going to get into Phase 4, which I think is really, really important. And I think that not very many people think about this as a part of the team building process. And I want to kind of hammer home that this is hugely important, and you have to contend with this, all right? Team building is not finished by the time you play your first game with the team. You are going to play, you're going to figure out some interactions, like things work on paper in your head, but you might not have considered like, oh, I can beat say Suicune if the sand is up, but then you play against a team that has Suicune that traps your Tyranitar and then clears the weather with something else. And you're like, oh, actually, maybe my team's not as good into Suicune as I thought it was. So that's things that you might not recognize until after you've seen that happen to you, whether you're playing on ladder, whether you're playing friendlies, in tournament, hopefully not in tournament, but you know, it happens. So yeah, take these as learning opportunities and use that to go back to previous steps and make some adjustments. Examples would be like, you know, if you overlook a key element, like, you know, maybe your team loses to a lead DD Tyranitar. Like, you don't have a good switch in for it. Your lead doesn't do enough damage to stop it from getting a nice DD up. Like, you know, you were kind of maybe tunnel visioned on some other matchups and you didn't think about something like this. Then, yeah, you know, testing is going to highlight that for you. You might have a team maybe that's like, oh, it actually loses to Gyarados, and Gyarados is not that common. You don't see it very often, and you might just skate by and do really well because you never run into Gyarados. That's a kind of blind spot of testing, but that's why you should be testing against like a very diverse set of teams. Like if you have somebody that you can test with, ask them to use Pokemon that you have not seen the interactions for. That's a good idea. The third bullet point here I just want to highlight is that a team may work in theory, but you may not have the game knowledge or playstyle that suits that team. That does not excuse you cutting corners on key matchups. You might say, oh, I don't like Pokemon like Blissey or Suicune or Swampert. I want to use Pokemon that do some other stuff. It's like, well, you don't have any of those defensive pieces with ice coverage, then your team might get 6-0'd by a DD Mence. And, it does not matter how good you are. If your team gets 6-0'd by DD Mence, you're going to lose a lot of games because DD Mence exists on a lot of teams. So, yeah, do not use your playstyle as an excuse to make bad teams, basically, is what I'm saying. Get out of your comfort zone a little bit. Play with some Pokemon that you don't think that you'd like. Maybe you learn that you like them a lot more than you thought. How do you come up with an initial concept? Well, that's a great question. This is probably the most ambiguous part of team building, but you don't have to make it complicated. I'm going to show you this team here. This is my Blaziken team from my Blaziken video. What do you think the initial concept for this team was? It was to use lead Blaziken. I mean, it was pretty simple. Why did I want to use lead Blaziken? Well, I wanted to test it out. I wanted to see if it was decent or if it's trash. And honestly, I'm still not quite sure. I'm leaning towards trash, but maybe you could watch my Blaziken video and make a decision for yourself. But the ideas that I was coming up with when I picked this Blaziken to be in the lead is what things does Blaziken solve? What problems might there be that Blaziken actually handles pretty well? And Blaziken is pretty good against a lot of the really common high tier threats like Tyranitar, like Starmie, like Metagross. It's even pretty good into Blissey. So these are some things that we might use Blaziken for and do a good job with. But what weaknesses does it have is a massive question as well. Blaziken's not very good into Salamence, for example. Yes, you can try to catch it with an HP Ice, or if you're running enough speed investment, you can outspeed certain DD Salamence sets before they DD and get the HP Ice off on them. But in general, Blaziken's not very good at handling a Salamence. It's also not very good against Dug teams because it's pretty easily Dug trapped. So, as you can see, I did make some team choices to try to alleviate those weaknesses. For example, Porygon 2 is good into both Dugtrio and Salamence. Salamence kind of depends on the set a little bit, but generally speaking, Porygon 2 is pretty good into Salamence. Suicune is going to help with Salamence as well. Some of the other pieces of this team, like, for example, Raikou, are going to help with breaking through the bulky waters that Blaziken's not very good at taking on. And they're, filling out the team from there as well. Here's another team that I used. This is my Jinx CM Pass team from my Jinx video. I'm not going to lie, I don't really think this team's all that great, but at least when it comes to the initial concept, I wasn't actually setting out to make a Jinx team per se. I wanted to make a CM Celebi team, or rather a CM Pass Celebi team, and just tried to pick some Pokemon that I thought would be kind of fun to use with that. I'm sure that you've seen some special offense teams that are pretty close to this, that are probably better, but this is sort of just the way that I went about it. So if we're going to use CM past Celebi, the question is, who do we want to pass to? And there are some pretty good Pokemon that can take advantage of a Calm Mind boost. For example, Jirachi. It does have Calm Mind itself, but if you could pass to it and maybe Celebi takes a hit that Jirachi doesn't have to, or Celebi kind of threatens out certain things that would deal with Jirachi, maybe for example Tyranitar, especially if you can get it low enough health, then you can pass to the Jirachi with the Calm Mind boost, and Jirachi can continue that and get that snowball rolling. Gengar's another Pokemon that I think is pretty decent as a CM Pass recipient. It's got really nice special attack, and it does not really have a way to boost it. So passing some CM boost to the Gengar can be nice. Dugtrio just works really well with a Baton Passer, particularly a specially oriented Baton Passer. So if a Blissey wants to come in on Celebi, on the turn that we Calm Mind / I should say Baton Pass, then we can go to Dugtrio and get that Blissey elimination. And then Jinx was kind of just a Pokemon that I wanted to try out, and I thought it'd be kind of interesting on a CM Pass team because we so commonly see Jinx as a sort of like suicide lead. And I was thinking, what if you tried to preserve the Jinx a little longer and to make it a little bit more threatening in the mid to late game, pass some Calm Mind boosts to it. Now, I mean, I think that Jinx is probably still better as a suicide lead kind of idea, but this was kind of an interesting experiment, at least for me, to see what's going on. And I did learn a good amount, even though I don't think this team is quite that good. I'm glad that I managed to play it, though. Do concepts have to be rare or unique? Like, do you have to be the inventor of some niche set that has never before been seen? Absolutely not. I'll show you this team from my Salamence video. This is literally a sample team. It's the team that's made by Fredazi that was taken from Revival Tournament's Discord. I think the team is called Ment Me Meta Spikes. And I looked at this team and I didn't change much about it, but one thing that I did change was I took Refresh off of Salamence, which, you know, that's a decent click into Skarmory because, you know, Skarmory commonly wants to get the Toxic off on Mence to put it on a timer. You refresh that off, and now Skarmory doesn't get much progress, although Roar is still a big pain in the ass for Salamence. But I wanted a move that would help deal with Moltres a little better, so I swapped out Refresh for Rock Slide. I also made some changes to the Celebi. Mostly made it a little bit faster than what it was on that team, but I digress. The whole concept of this team was I wanted to use a team with Salamence and Metagross, and there are plenty of teams that have Salamence and Metagross on them. They go together like peanut butter and jelly, but I just wanted to find a new one that I had not played with before, and I literally just found a sample team and said, "Oh, this looks pretty good," and tried it out, and I got to my ladder peak at least at the time of 17-14. So, like, I didn't build this team at all. I just found something that already existed, the sort of concept that I wanted. If I was going about building my own, I don't know exactly what I would have done, but that's a good reason to start looking for sample teams, right? They may already have a team that fits the sort of idea that you had in mind. So, plugging once again part 0, and telling you that it is really important to look at sample teams. But now let's get into the drafting phase. So you've probably come up with an initial concept. You've probably had some idea like, oh yes, I'm gonna make Shedinja work. I don't know if I'd recommend it, but that's your thing. You need to figure out how to support that idea. I don't know why I got your hopes up that I was going to talk more about Shedinja in this video, because really I'm going to talk about Ludicolo and use my Ludicolo team as the sort of example for the point of analysis. So I'm going to explain some of the choices that I made to come up with the team. I say final team here, that meaning the pace that I included in my video, but of course, as I got into further phases of the team building process, I've made some changes to that team. So it's not completely unrecognizable, I wouldn't say, but if you see me using it, it's probably not exactly the same pace. But here's the Ludicolo. This is using Leech Seed, Surf, Ice Beam, Rain Dance. Has a little bit more bulk, I think, than the standard Ludicolo does. But that was sort of the set that I wanted to mess around with. So we want to identify the strengths of the initial concept of this team, which was just a team based on Ludicolo. Ludicolo is good at doing 3 things by my estimation. It's good at setting Rain Dance, it's good at throwing out Leech Seeds, and it's good at checking Metagross. Not necessarily like a super duper solid Metagross counter, but it does resist both of Metagross's most commonly used moves, being Meteor Mash and Earthquake. I mean, of course, it doesn't really resist Explosion, but I mean, that's fine. If they explode into Ludicolo, then I think we'll take that. What are we going to do to get value out of these strengths? So, one of the first things that came to my mind was Heracross. So, Heracross is a Pokemon that could really benefit from there not being sand up, especially when we're using the Salac Heracross with Reversal. We do not want sand to be going up at the end of the game. That's going to limit our ability to succeed. This is a Pokemon that likes there to be frequent switches, because getting your Heracross in on something that is switching in, especially if you are threatening it with Megahorn, is really, really good. In particular, Celebi is a great example. Celebi is a Pokemon that would sometimes maybe want to switch into Ludicolo to stop the Leech Seed spam, and if you manage to switch to Heracross as they're switching to Celebi, now they have a really tough decision to make, because, yeah, they're not living a Megahorn. And then Metagross is a Pokemon that Heracross sometimes has some trouble breaking through. It's not the worst at it, obviously, as Megahorn is a very strong move and it hits Metagross for neutral damage, but sometimes you may want something on the team to get a little bit more chip on the Metagross so that you can get that Megahorn kill on a weakened Metagross, of course. So Ludicolo might help to facilitate that, because it can switch in, and if the Metagross is very greedy and tries to get more damage on your Ludicolo, then you can punish it by going for Surf or Leech Seed. Some other Pokemon that would appreciate weather clearing, or more specifically the one Pokemon that would really like it, is Curse Snorlax. So this is just the standard Snorlax spread, or I should say rather the standard Curse Snorlax spread, and I just kind of ripped that. There's of course some other stuff you could do. You could mess around with the EVs, sort of get it to do the sorts of things that you want it to do, but at least for the first sort of draft of this team, I just wanted Curse Snorlax. It appreciates Ludicolo's ability to chip meta or force it to boom, because this Snorlax is not going to be very good at dueling a Metagross, especially because we don't have Earthquake. Reason why we don't have Earthquake is because I don't want to really use a Pursuit Trapper with this team. Tyranitar would be a little bit counterintuitive, or counteracting the sort of game plan that we have going on, where we're going to want to remove the sand. So that's not a very good option for us, and I don't know if Umbreon is going to fit the pace of the team, and Houndoom is not necessarily that great on rain teams for some pretty obvious reasons. But so yeah, we're going to need Shadow Ball to hit Gengar, which means that we're not going to have Earthquake, which means that we are going to need something to help us deal with Metagross so that Snorlax can win in the end game. Sometimes some Leech Seed healing can help our Snorlax to make some progress against certain walls like Registeel or Steelix, who wall us. Other examples maybe like sort of Skarmory, maybe sort of Jirachi, like these steel types basically that we're not hitting very well. Yeah, it could be good, and if you end up in a last mon situation where Snorlax is not really going to be able to, say, break through the Jirachi, if the Leech Seed is up, at least you can kind of stall it. But also getting some HP back on Snorlax is never a bad thing, even if it's a Pokemon that Snorlax could probably handle anyway. A Ludicolo can only temporarily handle Skarm Bliss structures. That's one of the sort of weaknesses of this concept, i.e. just the Pokemon Ludicolo. Once it runs out of Leech Seeds, Ludi just cannot beat Blissey. I mean, it doesn't really beat Blissey anyway, it just kind of forces it to switch and stops it from making progress against the Ludicolo. And then Skarm can kind of just stack layers in the late game. Even if you're very diligent about getting rid of them, you're not going to be able to do much. And then plus, the Drill Peck damage is going to add up on your Ludicolo. Additionally, Ludicolo struggles against bulky waters like Suicune and Milotic in the long term. Yes, you can get a Leech Seed off on them, but if they get like a Toxic on you, or if Suicune is just going to allow you to run yourself out of moves, then there's not really much you can do. So we probably want some things that can handle these weaknesses. One thing that I had in mind was Choice Band Metagross. Choice Band Metagross can beat down Skarmory with Meteor Mashes, and it can also one-shot kill it with Boom. But it also threatens out Blissey, who, once again, is a Pokemon that Ludicolo doesn't really handle that well. And it can act as an emergency option versus bulky waters like Suicune and Milotic. If we get an explosion on them, they should die, and that can kind of open up Ludicolo to start clicking more Surf and Ice Beam. Another Pokemon that is nice in this sort of regard is Zapdos. So Zapdos is going to force Skarm to switch and threatens 2 KOs on all the bulky waters, including Swampert with HP Grass, although I don't think that Ludicolo is struggling too much in the Swampert matchup. Maybe against Monofert, but I digress. Rest is going to give some longevity as a way to beat Monobliss in last mon situations. You know, sometimes Blissey can be just difficult to kill when it's all on its lonesome, especially if you don't have any more physical attackers. And this is going to be a kind of a special leaning team, so yeah, we are going to need to keep that in mind, that we don't want to lose to the fattest special wall in the game if it survives to the end game. And then we're going to need to look to support the kind of underlying framework of this team. So we kind of have 5 Pokemon picked out, and we're going to need something that kind of glues it all together. Some people will call this like the glue piece. I think that term kind of it's sometimes got a connotation of a specific thing, like it's got to be this utility Pokemon, or it's got to be this defensive piece that rounds out your types and stuff like that, which is not exactly how I would think about it. It's just looking at like what's the 1 or 2 things that this team is going to struggle with, and which Pokemon and which set for that Pokemon can help us to sort of alleviate that problem. So what things have we not addressed? While Zapdos, Ludicolo, and Metagross can chunk Skarmory, they can't really stop it from setting a spike. Unless they're going to sack their Skarmory in front of Zapdos for absolutely no reason. But that means that while we've got some things that are threatening damage on Skarmory and eventually going to kill it, Skarmory is probably going to be able to get 2 or 3 layers if it wants them. And if it positions itself well. Say it comes in on Snorlax, we're forced to switch to Zapdos. It's got a layer there. And then it finds another inn, maybe somewhere like on Metagross, trades itself to get the rest of the spikes. That means we might need a spinner. Swampert is pretty good at stalling progress in the mid game if our Zapdos is compromised. So, you know, we're maybe going to lead Zapdos on this team, which means that it's going to be exposed to threats early in the game. Not to say that we're going to just sack it willy-nilly, but there are going to be some times maybe where Zapdos is going to be hit for a lot of damage. Maybe we're going to switch it into a Suicune to try to threaten to kill it, and it catches us with an Ice Beam on switch, and now we've taken a lot of damage. Maybe it gets frozen, maybe it gets crit. Like, bad things can happen, of course. So what are we going to do to help ourselves beat Swampert? And my original thought is, what if we had Starmie? Starmie's pretty good at beating Swampert. Hydro Pump is going to 3-hit KO. Or maybe it even 2-hit KOs after we get an Ice Beam. Say we slam an Ice Beam into a Salamence, and the best thing that they have to switch in is that Swampert. Well, now we just have to hit 2 Hydro Pumps. Rain Boosted Hydro Pump will hit like a freaking truck. So that's really nice. And Spin can remove the layers that Skarmory puts up. But for those who know the team, that's not the Starmie set that I included in that paste. It's not even the Starmie set that I'm using today with the team. I found that Starmie was a little too frail to consistently spin hazards over the course of a long game. So I switched the Starmie set to Def Me, but Def Me is not really as good into Swampert. So we have to come up with a sort of compromise that better fits the role that I need Starmie to fulfill, which is to beat Swampert and spin hazards throughout the course of the game. So I came up with this set, which is a much bulkier version of Starmie, or sorry, Def Me. Has a more defense investment so that we're not going to die to critical hit Earthquake from Swampert. And we have Toxic that will put Swampert on a timer unless it's the Monopert set or like the even rarer Rest Swampert. Surf is a easy the Surf defensive Swampert is an easy set to PP stall with the combination of Rest, Zap, and Snorlax. So if we end up in a situation where like we're not able to break through the Swampert, like our Surfs are not doing enough, and they're wish passing to the Swampert and doing just annoying stuff like that, at the very least we can use our other Pokemon to handle that set, and Starmie doesn't have to beat literally every Swampert per se. And with Recover, we're going to have some more longevity, which is going to allow us to continue to spin until we can finally beat down that Skarmory. So, yeah. I want to note that I have continued to make iterations on this team. So, I've already kind of said that the version of the team that I have now is not even the same as the version of the team that is in the YouTube description. I'm not going to give you guys that for free. Come on now. You got to join my Patreon or my YouTube memberships or whatever. I don't have a Patreon. I do have YouTube memberships though. If you want to get that secret sauce, all right, I give you guys the bad version of the team and then I keep the good version for myself. That's not true, by the way. I just iterate on teams if I feel like there's more stuff to be done with them. And I did feel like there was a little bit more to be done with that team. So I did make some changes, and you guys can maybe sort of philosophize on that. You know, say, what is this team kind of still weak to that we could make changes to the team and improve matchups with, you know? I'll give you a hint. Gengar is probably one of them. So that's going to do it, though, for this first part. I tried to keep things general, just some things for you to think about. But we're going to talk a little bit more about, in future parts, how to optimize sets for particular roles. Mostly just a little bit of a overview on how to use the calculator. We're going to talk about our good buddy, All I Do Is Win, also known as Benji, and his 3 tips for team building in ADV. They're very general, and I think that they're pretty good ideas. So we're going to use that as a little bit of a framework going forward. Then we're going to talk about what to look for when you're testing a team, as well as Benji's other 3 tips for analyzing games. Good framework for improving both your gameplay and your team building. They go hand in hand. And then we're going to put some theory to praxis. Great word there that nobody uses. It just means that we're going to actually use what we're working on here. So I will do a little bit of a team building video where I literally build the team for the video. So look forward to that. And then I'm going to answer questions that arise through the course of this series. So if you are wondering about certain things, like, oh, I heard somewhere that you need 2 Zapdos checks, how true is that? Or I don't know, any sort of questions you can think of, I'll try to answer them in the comments to the best of my ability. Keep in mind that I'm not a perfect ADV player or team builder, so I may not have as good at answers as you might get from some more experienced people. But you know what? Those more experienced people, they don't have a YouTube channel usually, so you make do with what you get. All right. So we'll see you all for the next parts as they come along.